Welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. It's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical,
charismatic
Anglican podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. Is this because of Asbury and the revival?
Yeah. That's it
great.
Completely.
I thought as much. There's a revival going on in these United States, which is pretty exciting. And Asbury Seminary, that is in Ben Wolpe's parish. And so I think...
Is it really?
Yeah, they have a student from there.
Is he... Did they invite him to preach?
I think it's the
something?
Wolpean revival. What happened is he moved to Kentucky, and then hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world sold their cars and vehicles and traveled on foot to this great revival.
I've noticed that something's been lacking here since he left. So I think that must be.
It's the only explanation.
He's the only explanation.
It's not really the subject of today, but I mean, it is really interesting that we have one of these. There's not been a revival like this for quite a while, a charismatic renewal movement.
Yeah.
Listening to some people who've been there, I'm starting to think this is the real thing.
Huh.
It's not showy, very basic, stripped down, very unmanufactured.
Yeah.
And really humbly led.
I would love to see that.
TV cameras not happening. I think Fox News wanted to come and broadcast from inside, and they said no. And the anchor from Fox said that there's only two reasons why cameras are not wanted, and it's either because you're hiding something or because you don't need them. And usually it's because people are hiding something.
Yeah. I don't think there's really much hiding going on.
No.
I feel Jenna and I have talked a lot about it, and the verdict's still out. I don't know. I can only hear about things, but there's so many places where I want to see revival or renewal in the gospel, in our town and in our own place.
I know.
Like, I don't know. I guess everyone has to. Maybe it's one of those things where you only really trust it when you catch it.
Did you think that this podcast would be the thing
that would cause the revival?
Yeah, in the entire Fox Chapel area. I think maybe I was thinking this would be ground zero for the next movement of the Spirit.
I think that I will believe it when when every country club in Fox Chapel turns itself into a public park. That's when I know
this is right. Suburban impact.
Yeah,
one tennis court, one swimming pool, one country club at a time. We can do this. I believe fervently.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that something's going on here. I think there's going to be something. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we didn't think that God was up to something in Fox Chapel.
I think he is. I think it's quiet. I think it's good. We're just, this is that kind of reflecting time a little bit with Lent, whereby just you do these services that only happen once a year.
Yeah.
Right. And so the contrast between the year before is stark. The contrast week to week, you don't necessarily see.
Oh, yeah.
But how's the church developed? Say like Ash Wednesday. Well, I've only done 9 of them, 10.
Yeah.
So you can sort of see, wow, there's a lot of people here. This was a good service on Wednesday.
People are coming to it.
Yeah. And I think there is a sense of just growing, modest hunger, growth, and
yeah. And an increased
excitement.
Seriousness playing its way out.
I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I long to see that in so many places.
Me too. And a church just comfortable, I think, laughing at itself, laughing about scriptural jokes. I went to a home group a month ago, and people were just casually making jokes that required some biblical literacy to understand the joke.
Yeah.
And then the whole room laughed. And that was really great. The whole room was just laughing at this thing. And that was cool to see.
Yeah.
Little moments.
People taking steps of vulnerability.
That's awesome. And you were good at the weekend. You preached, it's Monday afternoon now.
Yeah.
So it's still fresh in my mind. And you preached, you were funny, self-deprecating. You talked a lot about sex. It seems that that's been a big deal in the last few weeks.
Yeah, we're in this place in 1 Corinthians where the text necessitates it. Necessitates it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I mean, you preached 2 weeks in a row.
You
on
fled.
the same kind of thing. And
when it says flee
fled.
sexual immorality, you literally did.
I did flee sexual immorality. Flee having to preach about sexual immorality.
Slightly sort of over application, I think.
I'm just gonna, I can't even talk about it. It's just too. It's too toxic.
There's a little footnote in the ESV that says the early church would often flee to Springdale and hide.
To those of you who don't know what we're talking about, for our listeners over in Russia, I am just coming off of 3 weeks away for paternity leave, and I had our little daughter Junia was born, and mama and baby are doing well.
Yeah,
and I was scheduled to preach, but I just kind of like dropped it in the rector's lap and said, good luck with this one.
Here's my observation. I think I mentioned it to you yesterday. As much as these passages were quote unquote hard or challenging, they weren't actually. They were just a bit abrasive to our culture, but they weren't objectively any more difficult to translate or read or understand. I found these sermons, in a sense, easier.
Yeah.
Than passages that maybe feel more familiar and you would think would be easy to preach. I mean, I made a joke about how one of the sermons kind of almost wrote itself, but there's all this gospel grace, wonderful stuff in there that we're not seeing because we're freaked out by a word.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about 1 Corinthians, I think, is that there's so much. This book probably has maybe more controversial stuff in our culture than any other book in the Bible that I can think of.
That's probably true.
It hits like all of the hot button notes, but it's so steeped in grace and like the gospel really and mercy of God.
It's really good.
And even the tone, the tone of the letter is not angry. Like
no.
Paul, some of the things he says in 1 Corinthians 7 are not like politically correct in our moment, but like,
but they're kind.
It's not some old guy barking. It's a wise old man who's giving sage advice for like, hey, this will lead to sanity.
So one of the intriguing little features that goes on here in the letter is these issues are more intertwined with each other than perhaps we first see. So we've jumped around through sexual immorality generally to more specific forms of sexual sin. Yes. And from that then to marriage and divorce and death and remarriage. Yeah. And now today, idolatry, the food sacrificed to idols, and then idolatry in general. And you could sort of say, well, hang on a minute, what's this kind of shotgun of themes that he's just blasted around?
Is he just like totally off his rocker?
Is he off his Adderall? Like, what's he doing? Like, come on, man. And I think actually, first of all, one, they're related.
Yeah.
And two, I think he might be deliberately intertwining his points, sort of making a point, seemingly changing tune, then coming back to his point and then going back to the new tune and then introducing a new point and then overlapping that. I think he's building up a sort of plaited sort of rope of different threads for a purpose.
I mean,
I think it's deliberate.
We see that like in orators and writers nowadays on a smaller scale, maybe like not entire topics, but like they're constantly feathering in new ideas and then returning to the old one, mentioning it and kind of it's compounding and building upon itself,
like jazz or something.
Yeah, exactly. With like a little bit slightly different iteration each time. So we've seen a lot of discussion about sex and sexuality, and then we see this 2 different sections where he's talking about food offered to idols, and we'll have to talk about that because that whole topic is rather opaque to me in a lot of ways, or has been. Right.
And what can we learn from this weaving of ideas together about what idolatry really is? Maybe we'll come to that a bit. Is idolatry just bowing and scraping to a neon god that you've made? It's a Simon and Garfunkel song.
I know, I'm familiar.
That's good. Or is it more than that? Are there other forms of idolatry than just, for instance, going to a named God of the Old Testament and bowing to it? Could our modern practices be idolatrous?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone who's like like, oh, I just got to go offer my sacrifices to Chemosh now or something like that.
Chemosh, I think, has really fallen out of popularity.
Yeah, he's not trending.
I would argue actually that Molech is doing pretty well right now.
Yeah.
Actually, I would argue that there's an Old Testament God who's actually on the rise.
Which remind me of Molech?
I think it's to do with killing babies, so it's a pretty big deal. And Baal, I would say, is, I mean, stuffing your guts full of things, and his missus Ashtaroth is a sex god, like definitely.
Yeah,
they're still around. Sex,
food, all the.
So there is idolatry in our culture that's just a bit more veiled. I mean, I think about Apple when they launched the iPhone. Their slogan was, this was 2008, this changes everything.
Yeah.
Like that's a remarkable claim. You're claiming that this is a world-changing product.
Yes.
And my constant need to know where my phone is and touch it and come back to it and pick it up, that might be idolatry.
Yeah.
Might be.
Yeah. I was Jenna and I were listening to some comedy from Aziz Ansari.
Oh yeah.
And in the middle of the thing, he pulled out his flip phone, and he's like, I talked about, he had this whole thing about how he was like got addicted to his phone, and he had to switch to what he called Team Flip, and I was like, oh, I need to do that.
And that was for real.
For real. The guy's
he's funny.
We need to have him on the podcast, Aziz.
We'll get him and Nate Bargatze. We can have them both on it. That'd be great.
I mean, I know they're both big listeners. So
let's just chuck names out there, see who's listening. Tyson Fury, if you're listening, I'd love to have you on the podcast. That'd be really great.
Yeah.
All right. So without getting too distracted, like Paul, who really is off his meds, we're in very briefly chapter 8 for some scene setting for chapter 10. This is probably going to be a slightly longer podcast, but we've been on and off a bit the last few weeks. So you can always listen in 2 parts. So that's okay. So chapter 8, Paul's talking about food offered to idols. And he says, now, concerning, which is like basically saying new subject. Now, concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. It's one of those quote things. Clearly, they're all going around very proud, saying, we're all clever. That's what they're saying.
They had a lot of slogans.
Is a lot of slogans.
All of us possess knowledge. I can just imagine them all chanting it together.
We are clever. We are clever.
Yeah.
And he says the trouble with knowledge, or the trouble with quote unquote knowledge, is that it puffs up. It makes you big-headed. Gives you a fat head.
Yeah.
And it's just an idea, I think, about being sort of proud of yourself, something like that. But love builds up. And then let's talk about food offered to idols then, because they seem to have a lot of ideas about food offered to idols. He says an idol has no real existence. This is verse 4. They're not real, right? Chemosh is not real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a made-up god. And there is no God but one. So that's true. There's only one God. There are so-called gods in heaven and earth, and there are lords. Maybe there are lots of powerful people around, but there's really only one real God, and that's God.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Not everyone knows this in verse 7. Not everyone has this knowledge of the truth. The quote marks have gone around the word knowledge now, so we're talking about actual truth, things that you can know.
Yeah.
But some, through former association with idols, eat food as really offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. Context. Corinth is a melting pot of rich and poor, pagan, Jew, male, female, all sorts of things.
An ancient city. It's a metropolis or a
thriving.
Yeah, thriving city with people from all over the place. Rich people, blue collar, white collar.
Old, poor pagans would only get to eat meat a few times a year during an idolatrous festival. So they would go to their shrine, for example, where meat was offered to an idol, and they would be able to eat that meat as they participated in worship of that idol. And the meat, according to David Wenham, was often pretty gross. It was like sort of ground up sausage.
It's like Jimmy Dean.
It was like that, yeah.
It's like not even the Bob Evans.
It's
like the store brand of Jimmy Dean.
Yeah, that's right. Own brand. It was the kind of, it was like a little sausage.
Yeah, the Shop and Save.
Yeah.
Jimmy Dean.
That's what it was.
XS.
Right.
Okay.
And so they only ever saw and smelled and tasted meat when they were worshipping idols. Right? Now they're Christians. They have got some new friends, and the new friends are rich, right? And also probably former Jews. And so your rich former Jew friend doesn't have that association because they've never been to a pagan shrine. They've never sacrificed to those idols and eaten the Jimmy Dean thing. So
The Jimmy Dean thing.
So what happens is they whatever it is, they would eat meat for dinner, like we do.
Yeah.
And so the Christians come into this house with their new friends, completely socioeconomically and spiritually, religiously different to them. And lo and behold, what's sitting on the table is a huge slab of beef being sliced up. And for them, they're like, this is really good meat. This must be a really big idolatrous moment.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just there's this lurch factor that goes off in their hearts. Like, I've only ever had meat.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you'd only have beer ever during an occult worship session where you did Ouija boards and a black mass, and that was the only time you'd ever had beer.
Yeah.
Right? And you'd only ever heard of it in that context.
That'd be weird. Yeah.
And then it's the church fall festival, and there's just plastic bins of beer all over the place for people to have. You would be horrified. You'd be like, what are these Christians doing with this really satanic stuff?
Well, the mind develops associations between things very viscerally.
Yeah.
I actually heard somebody say that no one actually likes the flavor profile of coffee. This is crazy to me.
Oh, yeah.
But like what we learn to like in it is that like we have an early experience and we develop associations with feeling good and warm and awake because the caffeine hits you.
This is like the same as smoking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so the thing that people like about coffee, at least initially, is the caffeine.
And this is what people like about beer, is the sense of being warmed and enlivened and relaxed.
It's the same thing. So
really interesting.
So I could see how like when you suddenly see people, it's like maybe the same idea would apply to having for an addict walking into a place.
Yeah,
I think
a great analogy.
Like if someone's an alcoholic, recovering alcoholic, and there's bringing beer out, like there's suddenly a ton of, you're triggering all of these memories for them and all of these associations.
Right.
It gives me a lot of pause. I do a lot of thinking about like.
So now he says in verse 8. Well, let's see. No, maybe it might be. Oh yeah. So verse 8: food will not commend us to God. We're no worse off if we do not eat, no better off if we do. So it doesn't really matter whether you eat the meat or not. It doesn't matter. It's just meat. But then he says in verse 9: take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. In other words, you're free to eat meat, but if you've got someone there, a brother or sister in Christ, who has this really lurch factor reaction to the stuff, put it away. Don't eat the meat. You refrain for the sake of them.
Yeah, have veggies.
Have some veg for the night. And I think that's just a really good principle. It's like, okay, you might be free to do a thing, but just because you're free in a spiritual sense, God really is okay with you eating meat, does not mean necessarily that you should, because there could be someone there who's really bothered by it. Yeah. And there's a wide principle that applies to everything we do in church.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to who's the most important person in the room,
right?
According to you, do you believe that you are the most important person in the room,
right,
or someone else?
So instead of saying to them, "No, you're wrong, you silly. Look, now you're Christian, you can have the stuff. You know what's the matter with you? I'm going to force you to eat this meat."
Yeah.
What you say is, "No, okay, well then we'll do that for a bit. If you change your mind in a year or two, let me know."
Oh, this is so hard to navigate these kinds of things.
Well, that applies to everything.
Yeah.
That applies to, for instance, musical preferences on a Sunday service.
Mm-hmm. And
it applies to preferences about how the building is furnished and set up and decorated.
Yeah.
It applies to vestments. It applies to, well, basically everything.
So I wrestle
service times.
I wrestle with this with alcohol in the church so much, and I don't have any easy answers to it, actually.
No.
But I had a friend who's a pastor, and he once he would like post on social media when he had a men's group with all of the alcohol that they had, and kind of like said something like it was clearly a featured principle in their men's group. And, you know, he's doing a good thing, like wanting to connect guys. And, you know, there are a lot of occasions in which alcohol is used responsibly in our culture. And, you know, I think his church was one of them, but it really infuriated a lot of people because there are folks for whom like that creates a really unsafe situation. It can be a stumbling block to them. So I wrestle about this with the men's group. Like, you know, these guys are going to get together, and when they get together, they're going to have a sip of scotch or something like that.
Right.
Regardless. So we might as well take that context and use it to study the Bible. But I want it to be a place that's approachable and safe for somebody who is a recovering alcoholic.
Right.
So what do we do? How do you make it?
And this passage is about that.
Yeah. So do I say like, well, someone could be struggling with this, so I'm going to shut the whole thing down.
Right.
Always in every situation, or do I apply a kind of how do I put it?
A nuanced matrix to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. I think Paul is actually encouraging us here to use knowledge to think through why we're doing what we're doing. So it isn't just a here's what you must do. 1 Corinthians is not a letter of do's and don'ts. 1 Corinthians is a letter that teaches you how to think like a Christian. Yeah. I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Think about others and think about how you think about others.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was going out with Kat, I think we'd maybe just got engaged, and her parents lived in Texas, and it was a New Year's Eve, and we were invited to this family's house for New Year's Eve, and they were all teetotal, like solid church people and teetotal, all of them, and they heard that this Brit was coming, this British.
You were in Texas?
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
Heard that this British fiance of Catherine was going to be on the scene, and they knew obviously that the British drink like fish, so they did the opposite of this. They got alcohol in for me and all decided to drink it with me, so that I wouldn't sort of be stumbled by the dryness of the night. It was like it was such a funny thing, but being very naive about alcohol, they bought the most disgusting alcohol you could possibly ever have. They got this stuff called Sheridan. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
It's like a yin and yang bottle of like black and white sort of sugary filth, and you mix it. It's like a sort of like somehow if you put like Baileys through the Large Hadron Collider and reduced it to its constituent parts, it would become this Sheridan. It was awful, and they like poured me a glass of this thing. It was terrible. They were being so kind, you know.
Yeah.
That actually the entire room full of teetotalers were all trying to drink.
Because you were the weaker brother.
Because I was the weaker brother.
That's so funny. It's really good. I've never heard of it going that way.
I think it's a unique experience, but it was really funny.
Yeah. I mean, I try to think about it that way. So what we do is, I don't really advertise it. Usually some folks will bring some bourbon.
The men's group.
Yeah, in the men's group.
Yeah.
But I always put out water, and I brew a big thing of decaf coffee.
Yeah, right. That's a good thing.
And I usually try to make some sort of joke / tone setting remark about like only having one.
Right.
Just to sort of like give everybody.
I'm always late. Is that why everyone looks at me when I get a second one? I've always wondered why. Is that why?
No. I don't know. That's a good question. You have to examine your own heart. In the words of what I said on Sunday, check yourself before you wreck yourself on that one.
Just pour a bigger one. Okay, so
I'm just kidding.
So that's chapter 8. Really, we're going to start the podcast in a minute. Chapter 8 is just some background. Some scholars have described this as an inclusio, the way that he talks about a thing, interrupts it to talk about another thing, and then comes back to the original thing.
Yeah.
He does this several times.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go again. So food, idols, idolatry, cool. Simple point. A lot of weaker brothers in the congregation were associating food with idolatry, particularly meat. So that when you are eating meat, which you're perfectly allowed to do, if there's someone there in the room who's got that problem, refrain.
Yeah.
Cool. Chapter 9 happens, which we're not talking about.
We're going to talk about that at a later point, right?
Weirdly, yes.
Because we had the liturgical seasons and Lent and stuff.
We're
doing the whole book, but
we've mixed it up a bit.
Mixing it up a little bit in this season. Okay.
So chapter 10.
Chapter 10.
Back to idolatry.
Back to idolatry. That's weird, I find. That we were talking about it and then we talked about something else and then we're back onto it.
Yeah.
Sounds like one of our conversations.
Well, no, which leads me to believe that the Apostle Paul has a very similar diagnosis to our own.
Our own. That's good. So here's what we were talking about this before. Maybe we should just read a paragraph and then try to understand it, and then we'll
And at 26 minutes and 28 seconds, I believe this is going to be a long one. So take a coffee, listen over 2 weeks, whatever.
Oh yeah, I listen to all my podcasts in like 10-minute chunks. Mm-hmm. Anyways, like I turn it off and then I'll turn it back on.
About the same sort of Springdale to Fox Chapel sort of driving time.
Yeah, it's enough time for Anyways, sorry, I'm ADHD. I'm getting off topic again.
That was a chapter 9 conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 1. Mm-hmm. If you have a Bible, otherwise just if you're driving or whatever, just follow along. Paul says this, "For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud." I was talking about the cloud in the Exodus, the cloud of pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they were all under the cloud, under God's like deliverance in the Exodus, all passed through the sea, it's the Red Sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So they went through this transformative experience.
Right.
An encounter with God. All ate the same spiritual food. That's the manna, I guess. And all drank the same spiritual drink, water from the rock. They drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ.
Not Dwayne Johnson.
No.
Which I think needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, I'll make sure I clarify that on Sunday. We're not talking about Dwayne Johnson. He totally uses steroids.
Oh, wait a minute. This is going out now. We don't know that. Yeah, it's been alleged. On. We don't know that. He might eat a lot of meat.
Come on. I'm just going to go. I'm going to stake my reputation on this one.
Someone gave us a jar of that like muscle powder stuff that every American has on top of their fridge. Unbearable. Horrible.
Muscle milk or whatever.
Yeah, like you just like put it into like whatever, sneak it into your food.
Oh yeah.
It's rank.
Yeah, it's just miserable. Oh goodness. Okay. So the rock was Christ.
Absolutely. I think that needs to be emphasized.
And nevertheless, with most of them, that's the people, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. So something there, God was not pleased with them. I guess they were disobedient, and the result of that was that they were overthrown. Now these things took place as an example for us. That's an interesting way to view the Old Testament, that we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Where's that written?
I'll find out for us.
Okay. We must not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. We must not put Christ to the test as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. That's when they were grumbling. Nor grumble as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroyer. So these are the people who had been through this transformative experience, had sexual immorality, and putting God to the test, and grumbling. Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it.
Wow.
Okay, what's going on with this? This is like a strange turn.
Well, first of all, it's a quote from Exodus 32:6, just in case anyone's wondering.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, well, it is strange, isn't it? So obviously they escape Egypt, right, with God as this pillar through the parting of the sea.
Yeah.
And with Moses, they drink from a rock. They get all this great stuff. Moses goes on up to get the Ten Commandments. While he's up there, the people take all the jewelry that they have.
Oh, yeah, there was that.
Throw it into a fire, build a golden calf, which is an idol.
Oh, yeah, that happened.
And bow down and worship it. Interestingly, under the reign of King Jeroboam of Israel, just after the dividing of the kingdom of Israel and Judah, the first thing Jeroboam does is to construct 2 golden calves and says, "Behold, the gods that delivered you out of slavery in Egypt."
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So just totally referencing this passage. There's this sense of wanting to attribute to something your salvation. And they, literally minutes after being delivered by Yahweh, decide that in fact they were delivered by a cow that they actually made shortly after they were delivered.
Okay. Yeah, that's a strange thing to do.
So do we do that?
Surely not. We don't struggle with idolatry.
Surely we wouldn't be so stupid as to be delivered and then go running right back to slavery.
Yeah.
Be set free by God and then immediately
to pool our wealth and create
something.
Images of things that we think will deliver us and give us the good life.
Right.
No, sure, we don't do that. No, I think it's really informative. So in the ancient world, right, they had this understanding that everything was ruled by various localized deities. Mm-hmm. So there was not one. It was a new idea of new concept. It was foreign to most of the ancients that there was a one God who ruled heaven and earth and everything in between. They would be like, well, okay, let's see if so and so the water god will help us get water.
Right. And often the kind of higher god in many cultures was represented by a cow. Interestingly.
Yeah. Okay, so they want to have, and making that image of the God, is that it gives you a sense of control, I guess, over them?
Well, that's a really interesting thing. Yeah, I don't know. I made you. You owe me. Is there something, or even just basically, look what I've done for you. I think there's that sense. I've heard Christians say this. I heard a crazy charismatic guy say, I thank God in advance for stuff he's not done yet, so that he's now obliged to do it because God doesn't want to be in my debt. I heard someone say that.
That's weird.
I thank God. I thank you,
That's
God.
heretical.
I thank you, God, that I just won the lottery today. Now I've got to win it. God's going to have to do that. Obviously, ridiculous. But we do this sort of idea, don't we? I'm going to do this thing, and God, and I'm going to, and I'm going to be okay.
That sounds like something that my 4-year-old would do. Like, I thank you, Dad, for giving me this cookie.
Is he a conference speaker?
He could be. He'd be compelling. I think he's
Was
hilarious.
he big in Toronto in the late 90s?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so they had this tendency to want to have a little bit of like get their deliverance from Yahweh, but also have this other more controllable kind of religious impulse.
Yeah.
There's an element of kind of trusting, but also not trusting, and clinging to God, but also clinging to this other thing. Take it and and then leave it. And
he ties this up with some themes from before, really interestingly, in verse 8, right? So sexual immorality, there's a form of idolatry. Grumbling, there's a form of idolatry. That's verse 10. That's an interesting thing to put together, isn't it? Just put those two things. There's 2 examples of idolatry.
Sexual immorality is total idolatry. The idea that you will you can get satisfaction or fulfillment.
You're the center of attention. It's all for you.
Yeah.
They work for you. You can take what you like.
It also is interesting that like in the ancient temple cults, they would have like the temples would have like temple prostitutes. It was always a sexual thing, in many cases. So it's just like,
I mean,
it gives me pause.
I don't know. Some scholars have said that men have a tendency to be more likely to trend towards sexual immorality than women. And that women have a tendency to be more likely to complain about stuff than men. And that's a caricature and an exaggeration. And obviously, men and women experience life on a kind of spectrum of both masculine and feminine traits. But it's interesting that you've got these two things next to each other. That kind of grumbling, complaining, gossiping kind of thing in verse 10. And we often would think of, a big ministry wrecking problem. Well, obviously an affair.
Yeah.
A big ministry wrecking problem. I was just a bit whiny this morning in the office.
I'm a persistent
They seem to go together, according to Paul. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And both of them are idolatry, because in both of the cases, you're the center of attention. It's all about you. You're not getting your way, and you should be satisfied.
Putting the self at the center of your universe. It seems like that's what's happening. I keep coming back to this, and as we read through Corinthians, that seems like it's the thing. It's like the struggle they have. So he's saying there's going to be these temptations.
Yeah.
If anyone thinks that, verse 12, if anyone who thinks that he stands, take heed lest he fall. So don't be arrogant.
Don't be proud.
But at the same time, on the other hand, verse 13, there's no temptation that's overtaken you that's not common to man.
I find that really helpful.
Yeah, it is. God. Go ahead.
God is faithful and not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he'll provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful. There's always going to be a morally right solution to situations that you're in. We're put in as Christians, we're often in situations actually morally very confusing for us, very nuanced.
It's life, yeah.
Right. And yet there is actually always a thing you can do.
Yeah.
There's not a trap that you cannot be out of.
There's always a direction, yeah.
There's always redemption. There's always a means of escape. There's always a means of rescue, because God is a redeeming rescuer from outside of the problem.
Yeah.
So if you're in a situation that looks complex, the solution is not to just do the wrong thing and say there's nothing I could do about it.
That's a victim mentality.
It is. And one of my friends at seminary, he got very, very upset about a Myers-Briggs session that we were doing, where everyone was getting that little, whatever it is, ENTP, ADHD kind of, little slogan.
Is that?
And I don't think it is in Myers-Briggs, no. But it's in the DSM. But you have this sense almost of fatalism sometimes with these labels.
Oh,
I've done
totally.
an Enneagram and I'm a 9, and therefore I can only, I don't know, whatever, dominate this church meeting. And I think those things can be helpful as little tools that tell you a bit about yourself. They can be helpful. But what they cannot become is traps whereby you say, well, look, I'm never going to bring my communication under the lordship of Christ. I'm never going to allow the Holy Spirit to redeem the way I talk, because I'm just an E, I'm an ENTP.
I just don't have a filter.
No, I can't have one, you see, because I'm a 50 point E.
Oh yeah.
Well, okay, but you can also shut up.
We always used to make my dad so mad about this, because we got really into the Myers-Briggs when I was in seminary, and he would always be like, I don't believe in the Myers-Briggs. I just don't buy it. And I would just be like, yeah, that's just because you're an ENFP. And like we read through,
yeah.
and it's like you're painted into a box. Then you can't get out at all. Like you're doomed. There's.
I think that's really helpful though. Like to say like, oh no, I'm in this trap. Well, a lot of people feel trapped, and then what happens in a trap is the enemy who's trapped you convinces you that you're trapped, and in fact you're not trapped. And then he convinces you might as well live in the trap and do trap things because you're trapped.
Yeah. I think the devil often wants us to think that we have less freedom than we have. He wants us to feel like we're not free.
The God who can break you out of Egypt through the sea can break you out of your slavery to a particular sin. Same God.
God is just totally unconcerned about impossible situations.
So you can see why the enemy would want you to return to idolatry, can't you? Like, fantastic. Let's just take Egypt on the road. Yeah. Let's just have a portable Egypt.
Portable Egypt. Yeah. We all carry one with us, right? Okay. So there's this idea that idolatry was present in the Old Testament, and Paul is saying this is instruction for us,
right?
Like, and this is an important point about the way that we read the Old Testament. It is not often a to-do manual, but it does give us a what not to do example. Like, don't dare to be a David.
This is great. It's like the opposite of a manual.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's right.
Like, it's by way of negation, it's great instruction. Like because it's full of people constantly.
That's really funny.
Bashing their head against a wall.
Yeah, that's really funny. It's like getting a washing machine manual. What you don't want to do is like just fill it with broken glass. Helpful.
Thank you.
Narrowed down the options.
Yeah.
So we have this, that context you just mentioned, and the context earlier from chapter 8, which is not only was there idolatry in the Old Testament, but there was idolatry in Corinth.
Yes.
And Paul is saying, okay, there were actual idols in Corinth, albeit non-existent ones.
Yeah.
That people were actually worshipping with sausage from Jimmy Dean. But don't forget that there are lots of forms of idolatry, including the idolatry that goes on in your own heart. And in a sense, we all have our idols.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where he's got to so far.
Yeah, that's where he's going.
Okay, cool.
Then we jump into verse 14.
Go.
Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of this is where it gets like, we need to talk about this. This is an interesting point. The cup of, verse 16, the cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? The bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Consider the people of Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifices participants in the altar? I'm assuming they're talking about eat the sacrifices of the temple, not
the idolatrous ones.
Yeah, they're talking about like they ate the sacrifices of the temple. They're participating in the altar of the temple. What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, this is where it's really interesting. No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he?
Wow. Well, he's moved from the Passover, Egypt, to the Lord's Supper. And there's a link there that we'll get to explore later in the letter.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. And he's moved from the sacrificial system of the Old Covenant to the sacrifice of Christ. There's a link there as well, which we'll get to later in the letter.
Yeah.
So a couple of themes coming. Just worth saying that.
Yeah. And so there's this idea that so he's talking about communion, right?
Yes.
The cup of blessing that we bless and the blood, the bread that we break are a participation in the body and blood of Christ. So to be a Christian means being a part of this congregation where you are participating in the body and blood of Christ.
Right.
Communion is part of this greater unity, this organic kind of unity that you have of worship. And so, if you're also partaking, this is how I read it. If you're also partaking in offering food to idols, then there's that's a weird syncretism. You're doing the same thing that Israel was doing when they made the golden calf. Is that what he's saying?
I don't know. It's really difficult. He's gone for the word koinonia with participation, which is a significant word.
A fellowship.
Right.
Oh, that's so interesting.
That might be a bit more helpful to understand, that he's talking about being at one with in a very significant body way. When we have communion together, we drink from one cup, we break one bread as one body, we, the people of believers. And we do so also as members of Christ, as one with him. And so we have this highly symbolic meal in which we fellowship with one another and with Christ, given to us from Christ, enabled by his work on the cross to remember it as well. So the communion service that we have is really the kind of apex of all the koinonia that we do together, or koinonia, or however you want to say it. It's, how do you say it?
Koinonia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say it the same way you do.
I've heard
It's
it.
not
I've heard it.
koinonia.
No, I don't think it is. I think, it's koinonia.
Koinonia.
I think it's koinonia. Yeah, I think that's right.
Koinonia.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think he's saying it's the apex of what you do together when you're one is this thing. And you're one with each other and you're one with Christ. So if you're also doing the idolatry, you're doing this really weird kind of pagan communion, almost aping and parodying Christianity in a demonic worship. Demonic worship is often emulatory of Christian worship, isn't it? When you think about, say, a satanic mass, the whole thing is just a ridicule of the Catholic mass.
Is it?
You have black candles instead of white ones. You have a knife on the table instead of whatever. There's a cup of blood. There's these sort of inverted symbols of Christianity in a satanic mass, or a black mass, is sometimes known as. And 4 times he mentions demons here. Idols are not real. We've already said that. But idols are ideas that demons can use, and demons are real.
Okay. That's really big, I think.
And so when you participate in these pagan rituals, you are actually really doing a demonic ritual.
Yeah.
And you can't do the Christian ritual and the pagan ritual. You can't do them both. They're not compatible.
Yeah, just because that's what Israel was constantly doing, right? They're saying, "Oh, we'll get Yahweh for deliverance, but we're also gonna
make a cow."
And
they over and over again, right? I mean, they went to Chemosh, they went to Molech, they went to Ashtoreth, they went to Baal.
Yeah.
And there's another one. Can't remember who it was now.
Chemosh? No.
Anyway,
I forget.
But they would frequently go to the gods of the neighboring regions.
Baal. No, you said Baal. I think that's interesting. I was just thinking about what it must have felt like to
Milcom.
be... Milcom?
Yeah. Sounds like Malcolm. Doesn't really sound like a god, does it?
No.
It just sounds like a guy from IT.
Just going to Malcolm.
like,
hey guys.
That's it.
Okay, yeah. I wouldn't want to sacrifice to him either. So there's... I could imagine what it's like to be a poor Corinthian, or like a middle class Corinthian, if such a thing existed.
Yeah.
And you've come to accept Christ, you've had this powerful experience of conversion, and then all your buddies are like, "Hey, we're going down the street to the local feast. You want to
come?
You want to come have some sausage?" And you're like,
is it that Jimmy Dean stuff? Only the cheap version from Lidl. And you're like, Aldi or whatever. You're like...
Yeah, but maybe you'd be like, well, really, could I, God? Like, it's not that big of a deal, right?
I'll hold my nose. I know it's not real. I know that the idols are not real. So I can go, right?
But that's not what Paul says. He says, like, you can't walk into a pagan sacrifice and just say, like, oh, I know it's not a real thing, so it doesn't matter. I think his point is, when you're in the meat market, just buy your meat.
Yeah.
And if you're ignorant, there's nothing inherent in the meat.
Right.
This is an important point, actually. There's nothing inherent in the meat itself. It's just meat.
It's just meat.
It's just meat. It's the same thing with communion.
It's just communion.
It's just bread and it's wine.
Oh, yeah. This is a really good point. You kind of made this before we started speaking, and I wasn't fully tracking. I'm with you now.
It's just bread and it's just wine. And this is controversial. There are a lot of people who would disagree with me on this.
No, but I think you're right.
But I mean, Paul, if we take Paul's thinking here, it's the same basic thing. You're participating in something, but these things have been consecrated. Mm-hmm. These like natural things,
right?
Have been which means that in our community mindset, our psychosocial set of connections, basically what everybody thinks, that these signify and enact and represent something. Mm-hmm. So in and of itself, the object itself is just an object, but it's being used for something. So if you're in the market, you go, you buy your meat, whatever it may have been used for before, it is now being used for something totally different.
Yes.
And you have no awareness of it's being used for as a pagan sacrifice or whatever. It's now being used for, I don't know, your Passover feast or whatever.
Not? Yeah, because verse 25 says, eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any question on the ground of conscience. I guess the notion would be that basically if there was a great big pile of meat at the pagan temple, at the end of the service, they would take the leftovers and just sell them on the open market for dinner.
Yeah.
And so Christians going to a market that's essentially secular would be in danger of consuming meat that had been used in an idolatrous festival just moments earlier.
And you don't want to be like those people in Portland who are like, was this chicken free range? Like, what was the life in this chicken before you eat the chicken? Oh, yeah,
like was it emotionally happy?
Sort
of people in Birkenstock sung songs to it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I care about free range chicken, actually. That's the thing that matters to me. But like, but at the same time, he's saying like, just eat the stuff. Like it doesn't, it's just meat. But if you're aware, and if it's clear, you're at a party or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so he says this, right? So if an unbeliever, verse 27, invites you to dinner and you're disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. Don't worry about whether it was idolatrous meat or normal meat, whatever. It doesn't matter because it's just meat and idols aren't real anyway.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. However, verse 28, if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it.
Yeah.
For the sake of the one who informed you.
If he's like, hey man, this is special meat. This is imbued with the power of Zeus. It's going to give you extra luck this week.
Right.
Be like, hang on a second. I don't want any of that. I want nothing to do with that thing.
Right.
Because I rely upon a different God. It's all about the message that is sent, and it's all about context. And it's all about relationships.
Right.
God doesn't care. It isn't really concerned with the meat itself. It's not bad or good. It's just meat. I mean, maybe it's.
But if someone's offering it to you as magic meat, then you don't want it.
Yeah. And I think this is the point here that he's driving home that I see all over this chapter is syncretism, like of taking your faithfulness to God and diluting it with sort of de facto patterns of worship of other things.
Right. So syncretism is...
it's worshiping multiple things at once. It's taking an idea. I guess you could say it's taking Christianity and worshiping, making Jesus to be one God among other gods.
Right.
It's the dilution of the faith.
Like synagogue and synchronized, like the same words, right?
Synchros. It's that, I think, doing two different things at the same time.
Right. So you've got the idea of weaving together Christianity and paganism together into one sort of new tapestry,
and it doesn't work,
right?
Despite what sort of comparative religions folks in our culture might want to say.
Right, so now this is highly relevant because what I guess our cultural equivalent of that would be is the New Age movement. To some extent, you could also see it in a classical religion like Hinduism, maybe. You know, the idea that you could have multiple gods on the shelf kind of thing.
Yeah.
But New Age is particularly good at it, I think, because New Age tries to incorporate them all into one deliberate thing that's all one. So as opposed to saying, I'm going to put Jesus on the shelf with all the others, I think the New Age tries to say, well, it's all one, right? So whether it's the world, whether it's creation, whether it's you and your spirit self, whether it's the gods or God, all of it is all part of one great big wonderful thing.
Well, I think Buddhism and Hinduism, at least Buddhism, will have that core conviction that everything is one, or everything is illusion. And so the distinctions don't matter between things as long as you're kind of in the right. And we see this in kind of like an emotionalism too nowadays. Like as long as your heart is in the right place, or your general thrust is in sort of the right direction, then then all is well.
We're all climbing up different faces of the same mountain, sort of concept.
Yeah.
I can, and you can see how the temptation is, particularly as the letter talks about divisions and wanting to get along with each other. You can see how the temptation would fall upon the Corinthians to just say, right then, well, then I'm going to be a Christian pagan, and I'm going to be a Christian. I'm going to marry a pagan. We'll have Christian pagan kids, and we'll make this work because I don't want to fight.
Yeah,
you can see the temptation.
I totally resonate with that feeling too. Like, because I want to make everyone around me happy.
Right.
And I want to have my cake and eat it too all the time.
Yeah.
But I just don't, the message of Christ is so radical, and so that he demands you to go all in. Like, there is no other way. And so I think that Paul is exhorting the Corinthians to actually be entirely for the glory of God. Like verse 31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. That's the core conviction, I think, that we are, of what we're called to. But how do we do this, and what does syncretism look like in our world, though? What is this kind of thing? What's the parallel, I guess, I'm wrestling with?
Well, it could be anything that we're going to put our trust in, I think, or anything that we essentially worship, right? So it could be all of the things we've talked about as idols: body image, popularity, qualifications, financial security. It could be sexual preferences and getting what you want. It could be the grumbling, trying to have the world put me in charge and make everything look the way I want it to look. They're essentially all the same thing. And syncretism is a classic thing whereby those things get co-opted into Christianity. And politics and religion are very bound up. Ironically, in a country like this where they're supposed to be very separate, they're very bound up together. Yeah, even possibly politics in a broad sense has become the primary lens through which theology is done.
Oh,
on a popular level.
Totally. I think that's without a doubt the case.
Right.
It's the primary lens through which almost everything is done.
And I think about my own political preferences, and it's quite easy for me to say, well, look, the other sorts of political people, they do this. Like they've just merged Christianity with their politics, and they've actually corrupted Christianity, syncretized it, and made it demonic. But my side hasn't done that.
You mean all the non-communists do that?
Well,
Oh,
I'm
I'm just kidding.
I'm going to get bogged down in all of this.
Alex is not a communist, by the way. That's all we'll say.
I'm not a communist. No, I thought about it for a while.
Yeah, me too.
I do remember at school, I did politics at school, and I remember sort of the boy next to me was really into it, and communism, and I thought I'm gonna get into this as well because he's cool, and and every time I read the stuff, I thought it doesn't really make sense. I mean, he's cool and it's a great idea, but it just doesn't make sense.
It's super cool until 50 million people die.
Communism's horrible at syncretism because it claims absolute fealty.
Yeah.
And
yes, it is.
Who do they come for first? The scholars and the theologians, the priests. They always come for the church. The Khmer Rouge did, the Cultural Revolution did, obviously Stalin did. That's very clear. Lenin did, actually. And he was supposed to be the cool commie, and he shot all the priests. So I think you always see this with any totalitarian regime. It always seeks to eradicate threats.
Yeah.
Of which Christianity is a big one.
Well, because Christianity itself, while in a very different way, makes a totalizing claim. That Jesus is Lord that's a totalizing claim. Now, the difference between Christianity and like communism or totalitarianism is that we don't do that. We don't do that while sticking the barrel of a gun in somebody's face. The Christian gospel appeals through wooing and gentleness and kindness, and it's a different kind of power than other total than I guess totalitarian systems claim.
It's a very different type of power, and power has come up in this letter several times. The power actually is often displayed in weakness, is a central theme of this letter.
Yeah. Yes. And in all of Paul's letters, really.
It's a very subversive thing that he's doing in many respects.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, I'm trying to please everyone. Says that in verse 33. I don't think he did a very good job. I think we can safely say the Apostle Paul failed to please everyone.
At least not in our day. He gets a bad rap in a lot of ways, which makes me think that he's like actually pretty authentic. But I do think that he probably wasn't the most like.
I mean, I was trained in the Diocese of Southwark in London, which is probably the most liberal diocese in the Church of England, which, as we've seen in recent weeks, is a very liberal church. And I remember someone saying to me at a training session, when I meet the Apostle Paul, I'm going to punch him in the face. Cool. And I said, well, I don't think they do that in heaven. So you're both going to have to be in the other place.
I don't think they do that.
I'm pretty sure they don't.
Yeah, maybe if you like are really into boxing or something.
The lion will lie down with the lamb, but you know this. But guy,
I'm gonna punch the ball in the face. Oh, that's the attitude to have, right there.
Yeah, it didn't feel right. It didn't sit right with me for some reason.
Yeah, and you know what he would probably do? He would probably just take it.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. I think it's just worth knowing that, as we try and navigate these very difficult topics that are really just manifestations of a bigger issue, as we try and navigate life as Christians, even if we're doing our best, we're actually not gonna make everyone like us.
No. And nor are you going to, is it going to be easy?
No.
You're going to, the way of faithfulness will lead you into conflict with the surrounding culture, with people who you love. Right. And that's hard.
Even if you're going to absolutely tremendous lengths to try and fit in and love the people around you. I mean, this is multiple paragraphs of detail about when you can and can't eat a sausage. Yeah. That's detail. And yeah, even so.
But I think Christ calls us to become people of integrity, who don't just, who are willing to stand when it matters, but also willing to flex when it doesn't matter.
Amen.
And that's a hard line to figure out.
There's a mic drop if ever I heard one.
Thanks. I almost kept talking, but I thought...
Oh, have you got more?
No.
I'll turn the thing off. What else have you got?
No, keep going.
Oh, okay.
I'm done. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Well, this has been a podcast of Christchurch Fox Chapel. We are so glad that you would listen to all of this, and we'd love to have you on the podcast one of these days. And we'll see you very soon. God bless.
Cheers.